pleased to present Austin Faith Dialogue, brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations. Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interaction between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTVC. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello. I'm Barbara Holmes on the staff of St. John's United Methodist Church, welcoming you to this program of Austin Faith Dialogue. This weekly religious public affairs program is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries. Have you ever had to call the police or the 911 for emergency medical services? The piercing siren of an emergency vehicle is an alarming sound we hear all too often in our city and county streets. Yet, those sounds reassure us that trained emergency personnel are on the way, prepared to deal with all sorts of crisis situations. There's another team available to work alongside the police, fire, and medical crews if requested. Aid to Victim Services provides compassionate, caring humanitarian aid, especially to those who are victims. What is this service, and how does it operate? Here to answer these questions and tell us more about the program are Patty McDavid, Coordinator of Volunteers for Aid to Victim Services, and Counselor Chris Banbury. And we're so pleased that you would take time, come here and be with us and tell us a little more about this program. And before we even start, I want to compliment you all by reading a letter that was in Letters to the Editor in the Statesman not too long ago, someone who had benefited from the service, and the closing paragraph says, "To Victim Services, keep up the good work. With caring, dedicated people like you around, the world is richer." So you ought to feel awfully good about that.
We were very proud of it.
So Patty, you're the coordinator of volunteers, and maybe we would start with you. Give us a little capsule about what this program is and its history. How long has it been around?
It's been in existence now for about 10 years, just under 10 years. It was started by one person, and she started on a grant. Within 6 months, the grant folded. By that time, the City of Austin and the Austin Police Department felt like she did provide an excellent service and picked her up. Since then, we've grown to a staff of 13. So we're real proud of that.
And you alluded to the police department. You are a division? Explain that.
We are a civilian division of the Austin Police Department. We're all counselors, and our primary function is victims assistance.
So that means you work very closely with the police, but you don't wear uniforms or are armed.
No, not at all.
When the program was initially started, you mentioned one person. What was it trying to accomplish? What were some of the things that happened that felt like those persons who were victim needed some special care also.
Well, as you know, the first people on the scene are going to be your police officers, EMS, so on and so forth. And there was a definite need for psychological support services for these victims. We had people that were terrified, absolutely terrified that the attacker would return, or whatever the case was. The police have time to get the information, get the situation under control, and do what they can. But they have priority calls waiting on the street that they need to get back to. So, in my opinion, that is where victim services and the police enhance each other. You know, they're able to get there and start on everything immediately. We're able to come in behind them, do the follow-up, and assist the victim with anything they need while they are able to get back to another call.
So you respond to calls from the police department, Chris, or are there other, like the medical?
We respond to calls from medical services, fire department, as well as APD. We also have some victims that will call themselves. Maybe it's a referral from the police department. And as Patty was saying, we can spend the time with the victim that's often traumatized, that the police officer does not have the time to spend, and not as much training and counseling as we do, that we can cover that situation right then and there and then refer on to other agencies or other support groups. But we are available at the time of the crime to any of the emergency systems, as well as, like I said, some of the clients themselves will call us.
The goal in this is that because there's immediate crisis intervention, that victims will have a shorter healing process than what they would have otherwise.
Well, just to know that is available, going through something like that, a robbery, a break-in in a house, something like that is dreadful. And then you have to answer questions and forms to be filled out. So the human caring part of that is just vital. Do all police departments have a service like this? Is that a standard?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, we're probably one of maybe 4 or 5 in the nation.
We are the
police
pilot
department,
program.
right,
Yeah.
has
You
a program
are.
like this.
Mhm.
But 10 years, you're no longer, I mean, you're no longer a pilot, because that is well established, and it sounds as if it is a pretty stable department within the police working units. When you mentioned you have a staff of 13, are all of those counselors, do you serve as a counselor also?
Yes, I do. I keep about a 20 to 30% caseload depending on what's going on. Most of my job is administrative, working with the volunteers, but I do keep a caseload because, as you can imagine, the amount of cases that we have coming in, we have 9 counselors, and then of course we're going to have a supervisor, director of the program, and secretary.
When you say the volume, can you give us a feel for what that is per week, or maybe as an individual, Chris? Tell me first, what are your working hours? Do you have set hours?
Just recently we started a rotation for crisis team, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But right now my particular hours are Saturday and Sunday night I ride crisis team, which means I'm out on the streets, which makes our program more unique than some of the others that are in existence. We're actually riding in an unmarked police car. We have a radio. We're able to hear the calls as they come across the air and can be en route when the police officers request us. So therefore, we're riding out on the streets. Saturday nights, I work from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. Sunday nights, I work from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And then Monday and Tuesday, I'm off. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm at 9 to 5 at the station.
And is that typical for the 9 counselors that you spoke of? They would all have some sort of a similar schedule so that you cover not only daylight hours, but into the night also?
Half of us do that. The other half are strictly day staff. We have 2 counselors that are primarily child abuse counselors. We have several that are just, they work primarily the cases in the office, but are available to go out on emergency calls, as Patty had mentioned earlier, which can happen anytime during the day. And even in my 9 to 5 days, there are a couple of times that I'm out on the streets during the daytime working what we call an emergency call.
And because you are within the police department, I would assume a high percentage of your emergency calls relate to crime.
Yes, that is
There may
correct.
be others like medical or something, but
yes, the majority of our cases are of a criminal nature. There are other cases that we work that are not criminal. We make natural death calls. They come on the air, and what we do in a case like that is we assist families in just getting through the trauma, making phone calls, helping to make arrangements, things that happen at the time and you're just not really thinking. And we can come in and try and settle things down a little bit and kind of help them get on a track so that, you know, we can say it's not have to be done right now. Let's look at the priorities and just put a calming method there. So there are several cases that we do that are not criminal, but the majority of them are criminal cases.
well, how very, very comforting and reassuring in circumstances like that to have a professional on hand to help you with all of those questions
Right.
and where to turn next. As you mentioned crime, I have not heard any statistics lately. It seems as if in, the last 5 or 6 years, I was aware that they're saying has been an increase in the crime rate in Austin. Is that a generally true statement, or do you know, Patty?
I would say yes. As any city grows, you're going to have more crime.
The numbers?
You know, I can't see how it could happen otherwise. I know last year there was a survey done, and there were over 30,000 violent crimes against persons. That's not crimes. Those are violent
Here in
crimes
Austin?
against persons, correct. So you can imagine that's a lot. Yeah.
Yes, and particularly that limitation against persons, because there would be buildings, robbery, a lot of other things. So
Right.
that is just a microcosm. And to think that you all are involved in that on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure until someone has experienced either violence or been a part of criminal assault or something like that, they don't have any idea how traumatizing that can be.
Sure. Sure.
It just seems to me that would be very difficult to do on a day-in, day-out basis. I'd like to ask a little personal information. Chris, how long have you been doing this?
I have been doing this 4 years, a little over 4 years. I started out as a volunteer. That's before we had a nice person like Patty that was a coordinator, and it's a little more organized now, but I started 4 years ago, and I volunteered for 2 years. And after that 2 years, I was asked to become a staff member, which was really exciting for me. As a matter of fact, how I got interested in this program was I saw a movie on TV about 4 years ago, and I thought, wow, I wish something like that would happen here in Austin. And it was a movie about police officers' wives that were real concerned about their husbands coming off the streets and talking about victims, and the two ladies decided to get a program like this started. Shortly after I saw the movie, there was an article in the paper, and I called up and says, hey, this is what I want to do. So I was accepted as a volunteer, and July 2 years ago, it's been that I was hired on as staff. We have a great support system among ourselves, so that really helps us to get through the day-to-day trauma of doing our jobs, because we have to maintain a certain part of ourselves while we're out there doing a case. And when we get back to the station, it might be a little different, and we can go to each other and talk about it. But
So we debrief each other,
Yeah.
and you really, really need that.
That kind of support for you
Sure.
all.
It's hard to go home and cook dinner after
yes, that's true.
after, you know, some of the cases that we work, and we understand that, so we work a lot with each other.
Well, now, how long have you been a part of this program?
Well, a little over 2 years also. Victim Services had never had the luxury of having a coordinator of volunteers, so I felt very fortunate to be able to come in and start that position. We have just a little under 100 volunteers. Most of them are active. I keep up with those even that are not active, one way or the other, because we know things are going to come up in your lives and you're going to need to pull out for a while, and we hope that they come back. So just a little over 2 years now.
Well, as you think about the staff and the things that they face during their work day, and as you said, closing the door, walking out, and going home and resuming some sort of a normal life, Patty, as a counselor, and you've mentioned the times that you've been out and on the street, could you give us a hypothetical situation and walk us through so that we might really feel as if we're with you? Say it's 11 o'clock at night and you're on duty and you get a call from the police. Do you go by yourself? Go ahead, Chris, you answer that.
If it's 11 o'clock at night and I get a call from the police, more than likely I'm not going to be alone. We would be doing crisis team at that time, which means we have a volunteer riding with a paid staff person. Let's say we get a family disturbance call. The officers will request us to 25 them or meet them at a particular address. Once we arrive, we let them know that we're there. The officers will generally come out to our car and explain what the situation is. We don't carry weapons, as we mentioned earlier, and therefore the police officers will stand by if there is any potential danger. Normally and generally, we're not called out if there's going to be a dangerous situation. It's usually to a point where it's a much calmer situation at that time, and even so, the officers will stand by. After we've been briefed on what's going on, we go in, we talk to the victims. That could be husband, wife, children, family, friends, and pretty much walk them through the legal procedure. We explain that first of all, because the officer will generally say, you can file charges, you can get a protective order, you can go see the judge. Most of the time this is real overwhelming to a victim that's real traumatized. So after they've given them all the this, and this, we can sit down and take the time and explain, you know, okay, this is the procedure. Now let's talk about what's going on. So we'll do brief intervention at that time and pretty much going over the scenario of what's just happened and how long it's been going on, touch back on the legal process of it, walk them through it, assist them when they come down to file charges, offer our services to be with them, because sometimes that's real traumatic to go and make that first step to file charges or whatever has to be done. So therefore we are there for that part of it, and then we'll follow through. We, you know, keep up with our clients. We try to at least give at least 6 weeks on a follow-up on our clients, and within that time we're assessing and seeing where the client is at that point and can refer to longer-term counseling if that's what's needed.
Most of the time we are able to do that on very severe cases, but for most of the cases, or many of them I should say, because of our caseload, we don't always have the time to do that, but we try.
Well, that was a thought that came to my mind as you were talking. With the caseload that you have and new cases being generated all of the time, and you do characterize yourself as crisis intervention, so that there are other agencies, I'm sure you network and have referrals, but I'm sure that that friendly face and that person that was there at that time is very comforting to them to have any follow-up that you can do. But it would have to end because you all are just drowning, I'm sure, in caseloads. How many do you try to juggle at one time, Patty?
Oh, that's a
We've
joke.
juggled a few at one time or another. Had one sitting over here and one on the phone, and
one waiting for us to come out to see, or
we always managed to do it.
There have been times when we might be working at least 3 cases at once, so it's...
What sometimes we might end up, we Band-Aid this one, and it's not, it's important, but it's not a priority, and then we're going to take care of this one, and we get through with that one, we're going to go back and double check on this one.
Is there any training that teaches you how to do that, or is that just something you learn from doing it and trying to be 2 places at once?
Patty?
Fortunately, yes, there is training. To be a volunteer, to assist staff, as Chris was talking about earlier, on the street, you need to have 1 year of counseling in a paid capacity, or 2 years of volunteer experience in a counseling capacity of some kind, preferably crisis intervention, a degree in the mental health field, something along those lines that we can work with. We have time in training to focus on crisis intervention. We do not have time in a 40-hour training class to teach you how to be a counselor.
Now
There's no
wait,
way.
you're talking about the training that you provide for volunteers?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Because I thought maybe you were talking about staff
No.
training, but that's...
Right, for the
Well, let's
volunteers.
talk about the volunteer program a little. Back up and tell us what are the things that volunteers do. You've mentioned riding on the
Crisis team.
crisis team.
That's correct.
What are some of the things that volunteers in this program would do?
Okay, the crisis team would be the largest program and the most established at this point. It's been in existence longer. We have some volunteers that have been on the crisis team as long as 7 years. The next program would be our outreach volunteers. They are trained to phone victims of violent crime from victim services offices, and they go through 22 hours of training.
No, I was just going to say that might be some help for you all as when you reach the point you can't follow up anymore.
Well, what we end up doing, we're going to get called by officers on what they consider priority calls, the more severe cases. There are many, many, many hundreds that slip through our hands that we have no contact with absolutely at all. The outreach volunteers are able to come in and contact these individuals that we were not able to talk to and say, there is a victim services, this is the number, how you doing, just wanted you to know that I'm a volunteer here and that we care, and is there anything you need? Is there anything you need to know about your case? Are you doing okay? So they're a tremendous help. Once we leave outreach, we go into office volunteers, and they're wonderful. They help us make copies, answer phones, set up file systems for us. They're wonderful. So we have 3 different programs.
Well, Chris, you were saying that your interest was sparked by an article in the news, well, a movie, and then an article in the paper. And this was a wonderful article in the paper this summer about the kind of services that you all provide. I don't suppose this has generated any volunteers that you know of at this point?
Yes, it has.
Oh, it
Thank
has.
goodness. We've been very pleased. We've been very pleased by people that read the article and were, really cared and have called.
You've brought a brochure that can be distributed. It's called Victim Services, and you see the design of the heart there and the image of outreach. And if a person is interested, if they wanted to be a part, either working in the office, following up on phone calls, or actually riding in the cars, they call Victim Services Division, and the number is 480-5037.
Right.
That's during working hours?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you be available to go to groups to speak? I mean, you are doing several things, juggling several balls, but is that something if a group wanted you to be a speaker for, say, a church group?
I would be happy to. We want the public to be aware that our services are available. We want to get the word out if they need us. And as long as I can fit it in, I will be more than happy to.
As you talked about the volunteers that are on the crisis teams, what sort of a process would you have to go through to be on that? Do you ever have to do any screening? I could see that being attractive to some people that perhaps see themselves as a vigilante or a Rambo or something like that. What kind of screening keeps those people from or redirect them somewhere else?
Right. Fortunately, we do receive phone calls from people that are not appropriate for the program. So we do screen them very carefully. We also request that they not have a criminal history. We are going to do a criminal history background on them. They are ID'd. So they do go through a process. They fill out an application. They're interviewed for just about an hour, just as if you were applying for a job. So it's probably one of the more tougher programs to get into as far as in a volunteer capacity because of how careful we have to be. they are going to be able to obtain some information that's confidential. So we need to feel real comfortable with that person. I refer many people to the Volunteer Center here at Austin.
And if a person was selected and their application and screening turned out okay, and made a crisis team, what could they expect? Do they have any further training? What did you say? How many hours a while ago did you?
40 hours of classroom training on crisis intervention. Within that training, again, it's focused on crisis intervention. They'll also go through practicals. They'll also be tested at the end. And upon successful completion of that, they also have 2 10-hour patrol rides. We ask that they ride with officers, so a lot.
And that is intense. I mean, you really have to, not just anybody can volunteer for this program. You have to be very, very careful. Is the stress and some of the things that they see, do some volunteers decide that that's maybe something that they really are not very suited for? Do you lose many volunteers?
I'll let you answer that since you have them with you a majority of the time.
Yes, after maybe 1 or 2 rides, we may lose a couple of volunteers. Some think that it's not as exciting as they thought it might be. Some feel that they can't handle some of the traumatic things that happen, but that's been very far and few in between. I can't right now come up with how many we've actually just decided that they didn't want to do this. I can remember one year we had a couple that after practicals, which are really, we get really rough on the practicals. We make some really tough scenes, and we lost 1 or 2, I believe, after that. Just decided, you know, if this were a real situation, I don't think I could handle it. And we appreciate that, because I would hate to have someone like that on the streets with me, you know, at the time of a real incident like that. And
that's why you have to be so tough. Yeah.
Can't take care of them and the victims also.
And you don't want to re-victimize that victim.
That's right.
Which would defeat our whole purpose of being there. So yes, we need to be very careful. And we respect people that are able to pull out and say, it's not what I thought, or it's not what I wanted. We admire that. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It's much tougher for those to continue, and we can see that they're struggling, and that staff person feels like, I don't have anyone here assisting me, instead I am babysitting.
Right.
And that's not the only thing a volunteer can do if they want to be involved in the program. So that if people are interested, they need to get in touch with you. We've provided the phone number. We need to come to a close now, and I'm just so pleased that our viewers will have an opportunity to learn more about this program, and thank both of you very much for being with us and for your contribution, the work that you do on our behalf. And thank to all you viewers who have been with us today, and we especially invite you back next week at the same time for Austin Faith Dialogue. Good day.
Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.